Welcome to the next edition of BriefingsDirect. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. More than ever, businesses have to make difficult and complex decisions about how to best source their customer-facing services. Which apps and services and what data and resources should be in the cloud or on-premises or in some combination are among the most consequential choices business leaders must now make. Yet as the confluence of cloud and unified communications, along with data-driven analytics, gain traction, the contact center function stands out. Contact center as a service capabilities are becoming more powerful as a result of leveraging cloud computing, multi-mode communications channels, and the ability to provide optimized and contextual user experiences. We'll now hear why traditional contact center technology has become outdated, inflexible, and cumbersome, and why contact center as a service is becoming so popular to meet the heightened user experiences requirements of today. Here to share more on the next chapter of contact center and customer service enhancements, we're joined by Vasily Triand, the CEO of Serenova in Austin, Texas. Welcome, Vasily.
Thank you, Dana, and appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Hey, let's start at the top and put some context around this, level set it a bit. What are some of the new trends that are reshaping the contact center function?
Well, what's changed in the world of contact center and customer service is really that there's a generational spread that goes everything from baby boomers all the way now to Gen Z, and with kind of the proliferation of smartphones through the early 2000s and new technologies and new channels, whether that be things like WeChat and Viber, is there all these customers that are now potential inbound, discussions with brands, all have these different mediums that they want to communicate on. No longer is it just phone or email. It's phone, email, web chat, SMS, WeChat, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and there's other channels coming around the corner that we don't even know about at this point. And so when you take all these folks now that are customers of brands, you take all these technologies that exist out there, the consumers want to engage with brands across all these different channels, and they want to be heard. And now it's the responsibility of brands to determine what the best way to respond to those. And it's not always a one-to-one. So it's not a phone call for a phone call. It may be an SMS to a phone call or a phone call to a web chat, whatever those items may be. And so the complexity of how we communicate with customers has increased. And so the needs have changed dramatically. And the legacy types of technologies out there, they can't keep up. And that's what's really driven the shift, the paradigm shift within the contact center space.
Well, it's interesting that the new business channels for marketing and capturing business are growing more complex, and they have to then match on the backside how they support those people, interact with them, and carry them through any sort of process, whether it's onboarding and engaging or it's supporting and servicing them. It's an interesting time. So tell me a little bit about, why we're looking at a different architecture to support that. It seems very auspicious that we have architectural improvements right along with these new requirements.
Well, you have two things that have collided at the same time. You have both that all of these technologies have come about, and frankly, these technologies are existing in the cloud. I mean, Facebook is a cloud technology. Twitter is a cloud technology. WeChat, Viber, all these things, right? They're all cloud technologies, combined with just the evolution of the technology space, which has become a SaaS-based world. So the easiest and best way to integrate with these other cloud technologies is via the cloud versus on-premise. So you've had kind of what began first was there was the shift of on-premise technology to cloud, and that really began kind of in the 2011, 2012 kind of time frame. That was, let's call it the early days of cloud contact center. And then it rapidly shifted with the adoption of these other channels as a primary method of communication. And the only way to keep up with the pace of development is through cloud technologies, because you need to develop in an agile world. You need to be able to get the upgrades out to customers in a quick fashion, in an easy fashion, and in an inexpensive fashion. And that's really, the core differences between the on-premise world and the cloud world. And at the same time, we're no longer talking about a United States company, a Australia company, a UK company. We're talking about everything is global. Brands are global. Businesses are global. Customer service is global now. No one cares about borders of countries when it comes to communication with a brand.
Right. Now, we've been speaking about this so far through the context of the end user, the consumer, but this architecture and this ability to leverage cloud also benefits the agent, the person who's responsible for keeping that end user happy and providing them with the utmost in intelligent services. So how does the new architecture also aid and abet that agent?
Absolutely. The agent is frankly one of the most important pieces to this entire puzzle. We talk a lot about channels and how to engage with the customer, but that's really what we call about listening. But even in just human interaction, one of the most important things is how you communicate back. And there's been a series of time motion studies done within contact centers, within brands. You can even look at it in your personal life. You don't even have to read reports to understand this. The baseline for how an interaction will begin and end, and whether that'll be a happy or a poor interaction with the brand, is going to be dependent on the agent state themselves. So if I call up and I speak to Joe, if he starts a conversation, he's in a great mood and he's having a great day, then my conversation will most likely end in a positive interaction because it started that way. But if someone's frustrated, if they've had a rough day, if they can't find their information, their computer's been crashing or rebooting, or you hear this all the time. Oh, can you wait a moment? My systems are loading. Oh, I can't get you an answer. That screen's not coming up. I can't see your account information. The agent's frustrated because they can't do their job. That frustration then blends to your conversation, interaction guaranteed to end up poor. So the technology and making it easy for the agent to do their job, and we call these things like, the alt-tab, world of death. If they have to go from one screen to another screen to another screen to do one interaction with the customer, they're going to be frustrated. That will lead to a poor experience with the customer. So the cloud technologies, number one, being web-based. Number two, when companies like ourselves at Serenova are able to bring all those technologies into one screen, the agent can have all the information brought to them easily, all in one click, able to then answer all the customer needs. The agent's happy. That adds to the customer satisfaction. Conclusion of the call is, happy customer, and that's what we all want, and happy agent, right? So that's a great scenario, and you need cloud technology to do that, because there is one thing that is for sure: the on-premise world does not deliver a great agent experience.
Right, and another thing that the older technologies don't provide is the ability to have a flexible spectrum to move across these channels. Many times now when I engage with an organization, I might start with an SMS or a text chat, but then if that can't satisfy my needs, I'll want to get deeper, level of satisfaction. So it might end up going to a phone call or an interaction on the web or even a shared desktop if I'm in IT support, for example. So what's also curious to me is that not only does this technology allow you to intercept at different types of channels, but you can oscillate or vary between and among them seamlessly. So tell me a little bit about why that flexibility is both a benefit to the end user as well as the agent.
Yeah, I always tell companies and customers of ours that you don't have to overthink this. All you have to do is look to your personal life. The most common things that we as users, deal with, cell phone companies, cable companies, airlines, right? So you can get on to any of these websites. You can start chatting with someone. You can find your interaction isn't going well. And look, I've had these experiences before I started at Serenova where I was dealing with the cable company and chat, trying to solve my problem. And we couldn't get there. I said, we need to get on the phone. And they said, yeah, great. Here's our 800 number. Call in. And I call in and I start a whole nother interaction. Basically, I have to then re-explain my entire situation. Then I'm talking with the person, and then they have to turn around and send me an email, and I'm not going to get that email for 30 to 45 minutes because they have to get off the phone and get into another system and send it off. And in the meantime, I am frustrated. I am ticked off. And guess what I've done now? I've left that brand. And this happens across the board. I can get even two different types of interactions with the company. You can use a major airline brand as an example. I can call up on the phone. Actually, my SVP of operations just had this happen to her on Monday, that she got on the phone, tried to resolve an issue that was caused by the airline. They basically said no, 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 made her very frustrated. She's even decided that she's going to fly a different airline now. She then sends a social post in, gets answered by the VP of customer service, and within minutes they resolve her issue. But they spent 3 hours on the phone, pushing her off. Yet through another channel, because it's a totally different group, totally different experience, they'll get answers quicker. So by leveraging technologies where you can pivot from one channel to another, I can be chatting with you, Dana, and realize that we need to escalate to a voice conversation. And I, as the agent, can turn that conversation into a voice call. You don't have to re-explain yourself. And you're like, wow, that's cool. Now I'm on the phone with the facility, and we're able to handle our business. Oh, and by the way, Dana, let me email you the user guide. I can pivot simultaneously to an email channel, send you off the user guide through a series of knowledge base articles that I may have at my fingertips as an agent, but you and I are still on the phone call. And even better yet, after the fact, as a business, I have all the analytics and the business intelligence to say that I had one interaction with Dana that started out as a web chat, pivoted to a phone call, and I simultaneously then sent a knowledge-based article of X around this issue, and I can report on it all at once. Not 3 separate interactions, not 3 separate events, and I have made you a happy customer.
Yeah, we're really talking about enabling the agent to be a super agent, and they can, of course, be anywhere. And I think this is really important now because the function of an agent, we're going to already see the beginnings of this, but it's going to certainly include and increase to have more artificial intelligence and machine learning and data analytics benefits, where that agent might be a combination of human and artificial intelligence or IT functions and services. So we need to be able to integrate at a core common basis. So without going too far down this futuristic route, isn't it important for that agent to be sort of an assimilation over time based on more assets and more services, more APIs even?
I'm glad you brought up artificial intelligence and these other technologies. The reality is that we've been through a number of cycles around what is technology going to do and how's it going to interact with an agent. At the core, my view of this world, and I've been in this world for a while, is that the agent is the most important piece of customer service and brand engagement. But you have to be able to bring information to them, and you have to be able to give information to your customer so that if there is something simple, get it to them as quick as possible, but also bring all that information to the agent. So artificial intelligence has had multiple forms. It's existed for a long time. There's been multiple forms over time. It's sometimes people get confused because of marketing schemes and sales tactics that it's a way for cost avoidance, and I can reduce agents and I can eliminate staff by implementing these technologies, when really the focus is how to create a better customer experience, how to create a better agent experience. So the technology, even we've had artificial intelligence in our product for the last 3 years, and we're re-releasing some components that will bring this business intelligence to the forefront around the end of the year time frame, where about 3 years ago it was too early. But what essentially this does is I can see what you're doing, Dana, as a user out on the internet and out within these technologies. I can see that you've been looking for knowledge-based articles around, how my refrigerator keeps freezing up and can I defrost it. You can see things on Twitter. You can see things on Facebook. The amount of information that exists out there is phenomenal real time. I can now gather that information, leveraging what, let's use the buzzword of artificial intelligence today, and I can proactively now as a business make decisions about what I want to do with you as a potential consumer. I can even identify you as a consumer within my business, know how many products you've acquired from me and whether you're a platinum customer or even a basic customer, and then make a decision. So, for example, I have TVs, refrigerators, washer dryers, and other appliances all from the same manufacturer, right? So I'm a large consumer to that one manufacturer because all of my components are there. but I may be searching a knowledge base article like I've been doing, like I did about a year ago, around the refrigerator continues to freeze up. Now, I may call in just about the refrigerator, but wouldn't it be great for, number one, that agent to know that I own 22 other products from that same company? I'm not just calling about the refrigerator. I'm technically calling about the entire brand. And my one experience around the refrigerator freezing up may change my entire brand decision going forward. So not only bring that information forward and know all the products I have, but I may decide that I want to route that customer to a different pool of agents based on what their total lifetime value to me is as a brand. Leveraging artificial intelligence, leveraging all this information, I can be a better steward to my customer and to the agent. Because I'll tell you, an agent will act differently if they understand the importance of that customer, or to know that I, Vasily, have spent the last 2 hours searching online for information. I've posted on Facebook, I've posted on Twitter, so the level of my frustration already has a certain height on it, on a scale. And so as an agent, if you knew that, you may treat me differently because you already know that I'm frustrated. And so if I called up and say, hey, Vasily, I've realized you've been looking for some information on this. I realize you've been on Facebook and Twitter. I'm really sorry you haven't been able to get your answers. Let me see what I can help you. It seems that you're looking on how to keep the refrigerator from freezing up. If I start the conversation that way, I've now diffused a lot of my frustration as the customer calling in, and the agent has already started that interaction better. Bringing that information to that person, that's powerful. That's business intelligence, and that's creating action from all that information.
Yeah, it's fascinating. That level of sentiment analysis really brings together the best of what AI and machine learning can do, which is to analyze all these threads of data and information and determine sort of a temperature, if you will, of that person's mood, but then pass that on to a human agent who can then have the emotional capacity to be ready to help that person get to a lower temperature, be more able to help them through. So it's becoming clear to me, Vasily, that this contact center function and contact center as a service architectural benefits are far more strategic to an organization than we may have thought, quite recently, where it was really just about customer service. This really is the interface, the best interface between a company and all its resources and assets to the rest of the world and across customer service, marketing, interactions. Do you agree that this has become far more strategic because of these new capabilities?
Absolutely. And as brands begin to realize the power of what the technology can do for their overall business, it will continue to evolve and, frankly, pick up pace around just global adoption, right? We've only scratched the surface on adoption of these cloud technologies within organizations. As easy as it is for me to say these things to you, Dana, or people to listen to this and say, God, that makes sense what Vasily's saying, there's still a majority of brands out there that look at the interaction as a cost of doing business, and let's reduce that cost versus the lifetime value of both that consumer as well as that agent experience. And that will shift. It is shifting, and there are companies that are thriving by recognizing that entire equation and how to leverage those technologies. Technology is nothing without action and result. And so there's been some really cool things that have existed for a while, but it doesn't ever produce any result that's meaningful to the customer, and hence they never get adopted and deployed and ultimately reach some type of mass proliferation of results. Yeah.
All right, you mentioned cost. Let's dig into that a bit. For organizations that are attracted to the capabilities and the strategic implications of contact center as a service, how do we go at this in terms of evaluating it? Clearly, the old CapEx approach often had a high upfront cost and then very high operating costs if you have an inefficient call center. But the other costs involved, of course, losing your customers, losing brand affinity, losing your perception in the market. So how do you, when you talk to a prospect, a customer, help them tease out the understanding of why a as-a-service, pay-as-you-go, highly efficient, highly empowered agent approach does, in fact, perhaps save money and make money. It becomes not a cost center, but really a revenue generator.
Interesting point, Dana. When I started at Saranova about 5 years ago, customers all the time would say, what's the cost of owning the technology? And, my on-premise stuff is already depreciated, so I already own it, so it's cheaper for me to keep it. And that was the conversation, pretty much every day. Beginning 2013, it rapidly started shifting. Number one, because people started realizing that consumers wanted to engage on different channels, and the on-premise guys couldn't keep up. So it didn't matter anymore about the cost of ownership. The on-premise guys just literally could not deliver the functionality. And so whether that's your Cisco's and Avaya's and ShoreTel's quickly kind of started falling away in consideration for technology companies that were looking to deploy applications for their business to meet these needs. So the cost of ownership quickly disappeared as the main discussion point, and it really came around what is the solution that you're going to deliver. So customers that are looking for contact center technologies are looking cloud first, and I will separate out a whole chunk of the industry here in a moment, but they are looking cloud first. And once they see the power through demonstration, through some trials, what an agent can do, it's all browser-based, there's no client installs, there's no equipment on premise, then it just kind of takes a life of its own, and it's just what is the experience going to be, and are these channels all integrated, and can I get it all from one manufacturer? So that's first and foremost. There's a lot of other intricacies there around can it scale, can it be redundant, is it global, but those become architectural concerns for the brands themselves. There is a chunk of the industry, though, that is not looking at these technologies, and they are stuck either in, call it brand euphoria that, I got to stay with this on-premise stuff or with this vendor because of either their name or they're going to get there someday. And as we've seen, right, Avaya has declared bankruptcy. Avaya does not have cloud technologies despite their marketing message. And so the customers that are in those technologies now realize they have to find a path in order to keep up with the pace of customer service at a global scale. And Avaya is, the number one contact center technology globally and from the legacy world. And so those customers have to find a path forward, and they don't have one right now. So it's a little bit less about cost ownership, and it's about the cost of not doing anything, right? So if I don't do anything, what's going to be the cost? And that's going to be I'm not going to be able to have engagement with my consumers because the consumers are changing.
Yeah. So what about this idea that you must consider your contact center function not just as a cost center, but as a business development function, really a possible revenue center? Am I being a little bit too optimistic there? It certainly seems to me that as AI and the best of what human interactions can do across multi-channels, it can escalate and de-escalate. To me, that's a business development function now, no longer just a cost center for support, a checkoff box on some list of must-dos for any business.
When an organization reaches a pinnacle of happiness within what these technologies can do, they will realize that no longer do you need to have delineation between a marketing department that answers social media posts, an inside sales department that is only taking calls for upgrades and renewals, a customer service department that's dealing with complaints or inbound, questions. And you can leverage all the applications across a pool of agents that essentially it's just different skills. I may have a higher skill around social media than over voice, or I may have a higher skill level around a sales activity or renewal activity over a customer service problem, but I should be able to do any interaction. And, potentially one day it'll just be customer interaction department, and the channels are just a medium of inbound and outbound choice for a brand. But you can now take information for whatever you see the customer doing, and everything has a leading indicator. Everything has a predictive action prior to the inbound touch. Everything does. And now we can see that, and a brand will be able to have a consumer interaction department, see this information happen and properly route it to the right person. And if you get to one person and it ends up just happen to not have the highest skill level, let's just say, on upselling sales, you'll be able to bring information to that agent that will allow them to answer the consumer's questions. And
I can see how that agent job would be very satisfying and fulfilling when you're that important, when you have that sort of a key role in your organization that empowers people. So that's good news for people that are trying to find those skills and fill those positions. Vasily, we only have a few minutes left, but I'd love to get to a couple of examples. It's one thing to tell, it's another thing to show. Do we have some examples of organizations that have embraced this concept of a strategic contact center, taken advantage of those multi-channels, added perhaps some intelligence, and improved the status and capability of the agents, all to some business benefit? So I don't know if you can name these organizations, but perhaps you could walk us through a couple of actual use cases where this has all come together.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Dana. And I don't know if I can name the organizations straight on this, but I can definitely talk about some examples. And what I'd say is no one's reached that, kind of euphoria per se, but there's definitely companies that are moving in that direction. It is a culture change, so it takes time. And I know as well as anybody what it takes to shift a culture, and it doesn't happen overnight. It does take time. So there are companies. There is I'll call it a ride-hailing company, right, that engages in a different way with their consumer, and their consumer might be different than what you might think from the way I'm describing it, but allows them to SMS and call and pivot between the two. It allows actually the agent to make that decision, and the agents aren't even physically in the same country sometimes. They're dynamically spread across multiple countries to answer any question they may have based on time of day. But they can pivot from what's predominantly an SMS, inbound and outbound communication, into a voice interaction, and then they can also follow up with an email. And that's already happened. Now, it initially started as, hey, let's start with some SMS, inbound and outbound. Then they added voice, which actually most people think adding voice is where people want to kind of get away from. So if you already start in kind of the multi-channel world, why add voice? But what everyone realizes is that live communication ultimately is what everybody looks for in the end to solve kind of some of the more complex problems. That's one example. I have another company that does, I'll call it latest technology in food order and delivery. And it initially started with, kind of voice only. That would be the standard thing. I'm going to call in. I'm kind of, order my food and deliver it to this address. Now they've added in SMS confirmations automatically back, email channels as well for, more confirmation or more information back from the inbound voice call. They can actually start the order now once they're an existing customer from an SMS and pivot back to a voice call for confirmation, all within one interaction. And they are literally one of the fastest growing, I'll call it alternative food delivery companies, growing at a global scale. And they're deploying agents globally across one technology. And they would not be able to do this with legacy technologies because of the expense. And when you get into these kind of high volume, low margin businesses, cost matters. And so when you can have an OpEx model as well that will scale with you, you're adding better customer service through the applications, and you're actually able to allow them to build a profitable, growing model because you're not burdening them with high CapEx costs up front.
All right, well, great. Before we sign off, you mentioned a little bit of pipeline about your products and services, more engaging with AI capabilities towards the end of the year. But maybe you could give us a bit of a level set on your roadmap. Where are your products and services now? I think you had a recent upgrade back in March of 2017. But tell us a little bit about where you are in your roadmap and your product set.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we've been building cloud technologies for 16 years at this point in the contact center space. We released our latest version of the platform. Gosh, I guess it was March 2016 we first launched it. We did have a major upgrade in March of this year where we're really kind of taking that agent experience to the next level. And so it was really our leapfrog in the agent UI and making it easier, bringing more information to them. Where we're going is around really the customer journey, predictive interaction. Obviously, sometimes as you've kind of heard me, talk on this podcast around artificial intelligence. Some people call it artificial intelligence. I'll call it customer journey mapping with predictive action and insights. That's going to be a big cornerstone into our product. Business analytics, so around looking at a combination of speech, data, and text, all simultaneously to create predictive action is another core area where we're going, and continue to expand the reach of our platform from a global scale. At this point, we are a global company. We have the only global cloud platform built on one single software stack with one data pipeline. And we now have more users on a pure cloud platform than any of our competitors globally. And I know that's a big statement, but when you look at a pure cloud infrastructure, you're talking in a whole different realm of what services are able to offer to customers. So our ability to reach the likes of South Africa and India and Singapore and still deliver good call quality at a reasonable cost and redundant fashion, we're second to none in that space.
Well, super. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been listening to a sponsored BriefingsDirect discussion on how contact center as a service capabilities are becoming more powerful as a result of cloud computing, multi-mode communications channels, and the ability to provide optimized and contextual user experiences. And we've learned how new levels of insight and intelligence are now making contact center as a service approaches able to meet the heightened and even highest user experience requirements of today and tomorrow. So please join me now in thanking our guest, Vasily Triant. He's CEO of Serenova in Austin, Texas. Thank you so much, Vasily.
Thank you very much, Dana. I appreciate you having me today.
You bet. This is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at InterArmor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing series of BriefingsDirect discussions. A big thank you to our sponsor, Serenova, as well as to you, our audience. Do come back next time, and thanks for listening.